Hey friends, this is Robots. This is Tom. I'm out here in the wasteland, doing a little bit of research. You see, this episode, I'm trying to talk quiet, so forgive me if I'm not projecting or enunciating. But it's been said that there are some Deathclaws around, and I'm doing a little bit of research. I'm trying to see. Well, you see, the thing is. Well, let me know. Let me know if you hear anything. Typically, we'll know one is approaching by the heavy footsteps, and maybe some of the growly noises they make. But I'm out here in the wasteland right now, looking for remnants of Jackson's chameleons, because rumor has it that Deathclaws were designed initially from the chameleons, and It's very interesting. I think you guys should be aware. What was that? Aware of just the origins of these creatures, and we're going to go into that a little bit more as we go. But I'm out here trying to find a specimen. I'm not sure how many more of these are out in the wild, and if they exist anywhere outside of subtropical regions. But I live in Florida. Did you hear that? And I thought maybe I'd be able to find some out here in the wild, but I haven't found any yet. But just so you know, I'll just kind of go into some of the background of these chameleons. They're the little guys that kind of hang on the trees. They've got the three horns on their heads and the eyes that look different directions, and they can change color. They match stuff. The generic name is Triceros, which sounds like Triceratops, which is similar because of the three horns. The tri means three horns, and actually three, and the keros means three horns. And what was that? Did you hear something? Huh. Maybe we should move on. That was pretty close. We're back in the recording booth, back in the vault, all safe and sound. This episode, welcome to the Fallout Lorecast. We're discussing the history of the Fallout universe, and this week, if you can't tell, we're going to be discussing the Deathclaws, one of my favorite enemies in the games. And like I mentioned when I was, I didn't actually find any chameleons out there. I'm not sure that they're around here in Florida, but it was worth looking. I figured I might learn a little bit more, but I guess I'll just have to go with my research notes. So Deathclaws originated from the chameleon, from the specifically Jackson's chameleon, and they were mutated by the U.S. government originally. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but it was originally decided that maybe we could create a creature and use it in war. And the intent was to have something that was fierce and big, but also trainable and usable on the battlefield. And it seems like there's no indication that these were ever actually rolled out into combat situations pre-Great War, like with China. But there is some more information about how they actually eventually were used. And we're going to dive into that and the different kinds of Deathclaws and some more really interesting stuff. So, according to the Gamepedia wiki, which I normally use for these, there's a wonderful quote here right at the beginning, and it's from Chomps Lewis, about to be proven wrong by the Courier. And Chomps says, have you even seen a Deathclaw? They're taller than a man and far, far stronger and faster. And there's a whole pack of them out there. You'd have to be the meanest, toughest, and roughest bastard in the wasteland to have any chance against them. And I don't think that's you. Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I played the Courier, I'm pretty sure I was the toughest, meanest, roughest bastard in the wasteland. In fact, I specifically played Fallout New Vegas as a very morally bankrupt character who just took advantage of everything. It's the first time I was able to play a game not in like hero mode where I wanted to do the right thing. And I gave it a try, and my character was pretty dark. But you know what? I didn't always make the mean choices, but it was worth a shot. So anyway, back to Deathclaws. According to this article, it says that Deathclaw is a term referring to genetically engineered creatures developed by the United States military to replace humans during close combat search and destroy missions. And it notes here again that it came from originally the Jackson's chameleon, which is interesting. I guess that explains the horns on the head. You know, it doesn't explain the eyes though. The eyes look way different than the chameleon eyes in the Deathclaws that we see in the game. So the background here is that they were engineered before the Great War as a cheap replacement for humans during combat search and destroy missions. The project was successful in creating a ferocious predator capable of surviving on its own in the wild, though no references exist to them ever being used against the Chinese. After the Great War, Deathclaws escaped into the wild through unknown means and gradually spread throughout the continent. Initial spread was limited to isolated nests, leading some to believe it was just a rumor, a tale to scare children with. Though the population of Boneyard was keenly aware of their existence, as a single pack mother and her offspring claimed the area between Downey and Norfolk in 2161, keeping the gun runners in checkmate and terrorizing other communities in the region. A lone Deathclaw was also living near the hub, with an unknown number of Deathclaws experimented on and refined by the master. Now, these are all events that happened in Fallout 1, I believe, and forgive me if I get any of that wrong. Sometimes there's crossover to Fallout 2. But one of the things I want to dive into in a future episode is a kind of a general recap of both Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, because I know a lot of you guys haven't actually gone back and played those games or gone back and watched playthroughs of other people playing those games. And the plots are not that complex. The general plot is pretty simple. Whenever you don't know something about something, you always imagine it to be bigger and deeper than you initially think. But I'm pretty sure I could sum each of those up in an episode of the show and take you through the major points of each. So that's going to be a plan coming up. Back to Deathclaws. Their gradual spread throughout the wasteland raised awareness of their existence until they entered common consciousness as a lethal predator, but a myth no longer. As stated above, the Enclave eventually continued the research project started before the Great War. And this is very, very cool. There's a situation in, I believe it's Fallout 2, where they are released on the Vault. Yes, it's Fallout 2. And they are released into Vault 13, which we had mentioned in the Vault 13 show. And at this point, the Enclave has evolved them into intelligent creatures. These are the first intelligent creatures, like human level intelligent creatures in the world. And they've been evolved by the Enclave, continuing along the lines that the US government was using in order to develop them in the first place. And I don't recall, I'm trying to think back to any of the more recent Fallouts from 3 on, if there's an intelligent Deathclaw. There are intelligent super mutants you come across, and there's definitely ghouls that, are not feral. But I'm trying to think if there's an intelligent Deathclaw. I can't seem to recall any, but if you remember one, please write in and let us know. That would be really interesting. But I'm pretty sure you don't come across any more of these, even in New Vegas. But again, I'm just kind of speculating on that. What also is interesting about this is that most of the original information about the Deathclaws and their development and the refinement by the Enclave and the Master comes from Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, where they were initially, part of the games. And Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 take place about 100 years or more after the bombs drop. But in Fallout 76, there are Deathclaws. They have spread as far as that end of the nation by Fallout 76 to Appalachia. Now we come to find out that there is a West Tech facility in Appalachia that has been doing experiments on things like super mutants and stuff. But West Tech wasn't involved specifically with the Deathclaws, as far as I'm aware. So how they were included in Appalachia, I'm not exactly sure either. How they made it out there, maybe they spread it faster than was expected over just 20 some years. I don't know. That's something to dig into in the future. So back to Deathclaws again. Their biology. Let's go into the actual biology of the Deathclaws. The Deathclaws are 6 meters, 20 feet long, carnivorous bipedal reptile species designed for maximum lethality. The choice to make them bipedal was natural, as bipedalism raises the head, providing a greater field of vision and thus improving the ability to detect targets and resources. Now remember, these were designed to be military weapons, basically. So evolving them in a direction where they became as fierce and as formidable as possible makes a lot of sense. Also, the upper limbs were also freed by this choice and could be fashioned into extremely dangerous weapons. The claws themselves. I mean, have you guys found Deathclaw weapons in Fallout 76 yet? I love that. I love adding on that third claw and feeling like, I don't know, like Caveman Wolverine or something. That's pretty great. The caveat is that the Deathclaw is not as fast as quadrupedal animals. Though this is largely academic concern, the rippling musculature of Deathclaws provided it with superior strength, excellent speed, and incredible resilience in most combat situations. So they gave up some speed in order to be more formidable and more aware of their environments by being able to stand taller. Of course, their strength is magnified by their claws. Owing to their lineage, the Deathclaw has opposable thumbs, just like the chameleon, though an additional 2 fingers were coded into the genome for a total of 5 fingers on each palm, like a human. Each terminates in a sharp talon that allows the reptile to wound and kill with frightening efficiency. A single swipe is capable of bisecting an unarmored human in seconds. I don't know if you guys remember playing Fallout New Vegas and heading north at the beginning of the game, because you're not supposed to go north. You're supposed to go south. And if you go north too far, you run into the zones of the Deathclaws, which are basically this soft barrier between you and moving even further north on the map and kind of skipping ahead in some of the things that you're supposed to come across later in the game. And I remember just seeing if I could make it through there. At some point I was able to sneak through, but man, in that game you run across the Deathclaws and they just destroyed you. So yeah, bisecting an unarmored human sounds about right. So it goes on to say, the Deathclaw's hide is extremely tough, providing excellent defense against blunt and edged weapons. Firearms and energy weapons are reliable tools for killing a Deathclaw, though lower powered variants are very likely to have trouble penetrating it. Defense is enhanced by horns and dorsal spikes, making melee combat a very dangerous proposition. The Deathclaw is an apex predator of the finest sort, and the advice for fighting in close quarters would be, don't. However, while they are difficult opponents, their keen senses can be used against them. Loud noises and bright light, such as that emitted by flares, can be used to keep a Deathclaw at bay or even deter its advances. Very cool. Interesting. Use flashbangs, I guess, is the lesson there. So Deathclaws are pack animals. They tend to have an alpha male. The alpha male has a tendency to have a pack and will mate with the primary female, the most, I guess, intimidating and biggest specimen of the female in order to create bigger offspring and that kind of thing. And Deathclaws, as you probably are aware in the games, lay eggs. So from the reptile lineage, they lay eggs, the eggs hatch, the baby Deathclaws come out and they grow up on their own. Man, wouldn't that be awesome to have a baby Deathclaw? That would be great as like a pet in Fallout 76 that you can kind of keep around with you and it grows over time. That's I just came up with that idea. I think that would be awesome. Juvenile Deathclaws are born with prominent horns or dorsal spikes, which grow as it matures. So they get bigger and spikier as they grow, but they are already there. And Scientifically, these act as secondary sex characteristics. So that means that they show up and identify them as more male or female. Horns grow forwards on males, with larger being the more desirable, and grow back and upwards on females. So that's how you can tell when you come across a Deathclaw if it's a male or a female. Dorsal spikes grow much the same way as horns on males and act much the same way, with larger being more desirable. But on females, dorsal spikes do not grow as large as they do on males and tend to be short in comparison. Claws, on the other hand, are present from day one and likely play a role in breaking through the shell. Baby Deathclaws are born with a light brown skin tone and live under the protection of their parents within the pack. The skin darkens as the Deathclaw matures, reaching deep brown upon entering adulthood, and eventually dark brown, black, or even black and blue for old, experienced Deathclaws. Do you guys recall coming across any black and blue Deathclaws? That sounds familiar to me. So Deathclaws do not actively seek relationships with humans. Usually the two species come into contact by accident. They tend to be territorial, just like we are. And if one ends up in the other's territory, then usually conflict happens. They're incredibly dangerous, of course, to humans. And even the Brotherhood of Steel patrols, it says here in the wiki, are known for suffering major casualties as they walk into Deathclaw territory unaware. So, as mentioned before, the Enclave wanted to exploit this and kind of take it further, the way that the U.S. government was developing them. And they specifically modified an FEV viral strain to increase the intelligence of the Deathclaws. Now, what they didn't anticipate is that they would be so successful and would create highly intelligent Deathclaws that were led by the Deathclaw named Gruther, who decided to cohabitate in Vault 13 with the humans. If you go back to that episode, you can listen to how that actually plays out. Now, this goes to a Twitter poll that I put out recently. I was asking the community, another one of these fun ideas for future stuff for Fallout games. Imagine expansion to Fallout 76 where you can create a second character and you get to choose something other than human. And you can be a super mutant, a ghoul, a scorched, a mole man, and then the fifth option, which I couldn't add because there weren't 5 options, and I kind of didn't want to give it away until I did this episode anyway, was the Deathclaw, an intelligent Deathclaw. Can you imagine playing as an intelligent Deathclaw? That would be amazing. 20 feet long. I mean, bigger than a super mutant, big old claws, and intelligent. Now, maybe there's the drawback that you can't actually use things like projectile weapons, but you're fast, you're tough. You can maybe there'd be upgrades for your hide and for the horns and your skin. I think that would be really cool. I don't know, Bethesda, if you're listening to these shows, but if you can set up something, or modders, if you could mod in something into like Fallout 4 where you can play, and maybe there already is, I haven't looked, but maybe that would be great. You play as a Deathclaw. That would be super, super cool. Now, another little known, or actually not really little known, but interesting fact here that is noted in the wiki is that Deathclaw eggs are known as a delicacy. And I know that some of you guys have done this in games too. You use them to make omelets, and they're highly nourishing and delicious at the same time. So, Deathclaw eggs. Wonder what those taste like. I guess they're delicious. So let's go into the different kinds of Deathclaws that you can come across in Fallout games. And I'm going to kind of note which of the games these show up in. So baby Deathclaws, like I mentioned earlier, show up in Fallout, Fallout 2, New Vegas, Tactics, and the Brotherhood of Steel. And they're clearly very small, non-threatening, but, baby Deathclaws, and still pretty big. They're about 50% smaller than an adult human. So imagine a baby Deathclaw as being like a, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, something like that, running around with gigantic clawed hands, big teeth, pointy teeth. And that still doesn't sound that non-threatening. Young Deathclaws show up in New Vegas and the Fallout Brotherhood of Steel game. And they're considered to be adolescents. They're only about 25% smaller than adult. So They seem to grow pretty fast, and that also sounds very threatening. Now, regular Deathclaws show up in all of the main games and the extra sub games, and the notes here say that male Deathclaws reach sexual maturity are easily recognized by brown skin, prominent, fully formed horns, and of course, their claws. They are fast, deadly, and above all else, resilient, capable of dispatching nearly any threat with frightening ease. Taking them out requires plenty of preparation and planning. Moreover, male Deathclaws tend to congregate and travel in packs, as behooves social animals. Lone adults are the exception rather than the rule. And there's a specific instance of a lone Deathclaw that happens in Fallout 4 that is one of my favorite memories. As you are exploring the Salem area, and I think it's the Witch Museum, you come to realize that there is a Deathclaw trapped in the building. And it is big, and it is angry, and it definitely took me a few deaths to fight it off at the point I was in that game. And that's probably one of my favorite instances of running into a Deathclaw in an unexpected situation. There's definitely some others that come up, like the Deathclaw that was being held in, there's like a pit area in Fallout 4 where the raiders have it trapped and are using it for like games or throwing people they captured down into the pit, that sort of thing. That was pretty interesting too. Now, beyond just regular Deathclaws, there are other variants like the Deathclaw alpha male, who is a fully mature adult Deathclaw that avoids death at the hands of various wasteland horrors and will mature into an alpha Deathclaw. Horns are longer and curved and thicker than a regular mature adult, and the skin takes on a dark brown, black hue with age. The brown markings are also visible. Alpha males have siring privileges and are usually found heading entire packs of Deathclaws. And then there's the mother Deathclaw. And adult female Deathclaws are distinguished by a skin color that mixes olive and blue, horns curving backwards rather than forwards, barbed tails, and a prominent flap of skin roughly where the cloaca is. I pronounced that correctly after stuttering over it for a second. Mother Deathclaws, also called matriarchs, exclusively lay clutches sired by the pack's most powerful males, typically the alpha. And then there are legendary Deathclaws. Now, the only instance of this is in Fallout New Vegas. Found only within the Deadwind Cavern in the Mojave, the legendary Deathclaw is an alpha male Deathclaw that managed to survive long enough to achieve a size a full 25% larger than a regular adult Deathclaw. So if a regular adult Deathclaw is about 20 feet, this thing's 25. With massive horns and claws to match, this particular specimen is responsible for dispatching a Brotherhood of Steel paladin who tried to explore the cave. Mercy or not, they fell to the claws. So, huge, gigantic creature, Brotherhood of Steel paladin in full power armor, wasn't able to hold off this thing. And if you remember playing in the game, I don't specifically have a memory of running into this, but if you do, write in and let me know what it was like, because the thing looks formidable. It looks pretty crazy. Now, there are some other variations of Deathclaws that show up in the games. Things like the intelligent Deathclaws that I mentioned before. There are blind Deathclaws in Fallout New Vegas. There are albino Deathclaws in both Fallout 2 and Fallout 4, which is pretty cool. The Enclave Deathclaws actually show up also in Fallout 3, 4, and Fallout Shelter. And the notes here say that an adult male Deathclaw captured by the Enclave in the Capital Wasteland can be fitted with a domestication unit, a special contraption mounted to the skull of the creature and connected to the brain, giving Enclave personnel the ability to use these ferocious predators like guard dogs. So they're not intelligent, but they are manipulated. Deathclaws controlled in this manner do not consider Enclave personnel a threat, but the Lions Brotherhood of Steel developed a device that can scramble the control signal and reverse the IFF, making Enclave personnel the only valid targets for the Deathclaw and then detonating the domestication unit as a failsafe. Enclave units typically hold Deathclaws in transport cages, a pre-war design, released when needed. Some patrols may choose to field them directly, however, at the discretion of the commanding officer. So, very cool. I can't imagine, like I said, having a tiny little baby Deathclaw following you around, let alone a big giant Deathclaw. And also that device going bad and then the thing turning on you. That would be crazy. Now, there are some non-canon Deathclaws in some of the other games like Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel. In Tactics, there's a mammalian Deathclaw. This is a Deathclaw with fur. Kind of weird, but who knows? Maybe something like that will show back up in one of the mainline games. You never know. And then in Brotherhood of Steel, there's an experimental Deathclaw and a chameleon Deathclaw, which show up. The experimental Deathclaw is described as developed within the secret vault. The experimental Deathclaw is an offshoot of the regular Deathclaw development program undertaken by Vault-Tec Industries. Increased muscle mass and naturally grown exoskeleton with prominent spikes were achieved at the expense of eyesight. Experimental Deathclaw variants include baby Deathclaws, elder Deathclaws, adolescents, and mothers. And then the chameleon Deathclaw, like its name suggests, can have active camouflage, which makes sense because maybe those genes are just dormant through the evolution from where the Deathclaw originally came from. So very, very cool stuff. I really like the Deathclaws. Coming across them in the game is always exciting. And the idea that they could continue to evolve and potentially, like I mentioned earlier, come across an intelligent one in the future would be really cool. Now, there's a quote from Scott Campbell about the origins of the Deathclaw idea. And Scott says in this wonderful quote, "Was it always a big scaly lizard thing? Nope. My initial design for this terrible creature was as the apex predator of the wasteland." I think he got that right. But here's where it was different. A mix of Wolverine and brown bear mutated by the FEV. It could survive any environment and feared nothing. A legendary force of nature that struck terror into the hearts of men. Unfortunately, the artist took one look at my concept sketch and said, "Dude, that's way too much hair." It was true. The Wolverine bear was very furry and there was just no way around it. So here's what happened. The newly formed Black Isle started work on what would be Planescape Torment. I don't know if you guys played through that game, but that was a classic RPG too back in the late 90s. One of the first art pieces was a monstrous creature called a Tarask. It was sculpted in clay and was then point by painstakingly point digitized into a 3D model. As Planescape moved forward, it turned out that the Tarask wouldn't actually be featured in its design, leaving that tasty model in disuse. Thus, the furry Wolverine bear became a hairless reptilian biped. That's pretty great. Man, I love like little nuggets of how games are made and how things can just move from one game to another. And it totally fits. Like, it's an iconic creature in the Fallout world. It totally makes sense. And I'm glad that it made it in here and that we didn't have a furry Wolverine bear. I mean, it's cool if we have a furry Wolverine bear at some point too, but an apex predator with reptilian-like qualities that's almost like a improved dinosaur. Really, I don't know, that hits the right note. A big difference. So thank you so much as always. And until next time, if you are out in the wild doing research on chameleons, just don't do it. Don't do it, man. That was pretty close. I got too close to that Deathclaw and they're out there, guys. Just stay in your vault. Just stay in your vault. It's so much safer in your vault. Just stay. All right. Be safe. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to the Fallout Lorecast. All sounds and music are owned by Bethesda Softworks, and no copyright infringement is intended. If you have something you'd like to contribute to the show, please contact us at falloutlorecast@gmail.com or follow us and post some messages to us on Twitter at Fallout Lorecast. And if you'd like to support the show, tell a friend or check out the rewards you can get for becoming a patron at patreon.com/falloutlorecast. I really appreciate you listening, and I'd love to hear from you soon.